Hi, this is Linda Haas, Course Director for Writing 39B, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about the assessment study that we've been doing last spring and this fall with students in 39B and show you some of the results. We had 5 instructors in the study, and each instructor was teaching 2 sections. In one section, he taught with the Connect weekly assignments that we do in all the other 39B classes, and the other section did not use Connect at all. We had students write 2 essays, one in week 1 that was a diagnostic essay, and then by the end of week 8, the RA essay. The week 1 essay was similar to the RA essay, but shorter and a little less complex in nature. Then both essays were scored using the same rubric, and this is basically the same 6-point rubric for the RA that you're used to seeing in 39B. It had 3 indicators of rhetorical knowledge: the quality of the thesis, the student's credibility or academic ethos, and the student's ability to follow the conventions of an academic essay. Another 3 criteria in development of ideas using evidence and sources. This area could also be called the critical thinking. How much the student performed analysis and how much was just summary or retelling of the plot. The credibility and relevance of the sources that were used. And source integration, how well the student was able to weave the sources into his or her own thinking. 2 more large categories: structure and organization and knowledge of conventions. In structure and organization, we were looking at essay-wide focus. Does the essay follow through with the thesis, the promise of the introduction? Paragraph structure and coherence, the quality of each paragraph. And then the last 3 for conventions: language correctness, language eloquence, and documentation. The essays were then scored by the instructors and by outside readers. And we invited an outside facilitator, Diane Kelly Riley from Washington State University. She's the editor of the Journal of Writing Assessment. And after she took the data home and crunched the numbers, she found that we had 83% inter-reader reliability, which means that 83% of the time our readers agreed on the scores that they gave to the essays. And last, all the data was collected using Connect's outcomes-based assessment tool. Students uploaded their essays into Connect, and both instructors and outside readers scored using the rubrics within Connect. Before I go on to show you the results of Essay 1 and Essay 2, I'd also like to note that we had approximately 250 UCI students in the study, so 500 essays were scored to create this data. This number of essays is a statistically significant number of the overall students in 39B, so we can theorize that the results of this study are widely applicable to all the students in 39B. Another thing I'd like to note before we look at the results is that the students had 6 to 7 weeks between Essay 1 and Essay 2. The gains that students made, they made in a very short amount of time. And here are the results between Essay 1 and Essay 2. The gray bars represent the average score of students in each criteria in Essay 1, and the yellow bar, Essay 2. You can see that in every criterion of the rubric, students made significant gains in their scores between Essay 1 and Essay 2. Here's a representation of that difference. In other words, the growth in each rubric category between Essay 1 and Essay 2. Now let's consider this data by primary category of rhetorical knowledge, critical thinking, structure, organization, and language and mechanics. These are the overall gains we saw in each of those larger categories. According to Norbert Elliott, who is an assessment expert at NJIT, success in rhetorical knowledge is the best indicator that students are going to retain what they've learned and use it in future writing situations. So it's significant that our students made the highest gains in rhetorical knowledge. Also of note that our students had excellent growth in critical thinking overall. This is a focus of our curriculum. Both rhetorical knowledge and critical thinking were the highest areas of growth. If we dig a little further and analyze the growth, our highest increases were in analysis versus summary, thesis, and the holistic score. And I just want to stop and say congratulations to the faculty and the students for having such a high gain. This is 1 point, equivalent of about a letter grade within an essay between week 1 and week 8. We also had excellent progress in documentation, essay-wide focus, credibility and ethos, source integration, and essay conventions. We had good progress in these last 4 areas: the credibility and relevance of the sources, the paragraph quality, and language correctness and language eloquence. You may be wondering, why is it that we had only good progress with language mechanics for correctness and eloquence when we require students to use the Connect tool and we're giving them assignments every week in which they're looking at content that has to do with mechanics and correctness and eloquence? Why is the growth not higher here? There are a few things I'd like to consider to answer that question. First, remember that there was only 6 or 7 weeks between Essay 1 and Essay 2, and language growth takes time. And so maybe it's logical that we don't see as much growth so fast in this area. Also, if we go back and look at what were the highest scores that students had coming in, they were in language correctness and eloquence. And you'll see here between the 2 red arrows that the gray bars for language correctness and eloquence are higher than all the rest. But by the time that our students finished Essay 2, their language and eloquence were up amongst the highest scoring rubric categories that we had. So it's not that students are underperforming in language correctness and eloquence. They started out a little higher, the growth rate was a little slower, but they still ended up at a very good spot at the end. So I think, again, we're doing something right, and the students are definitely learning from having spent time in our classes. A couple more notes on the data of the lower scoring categories that we had. One of the lower ones was credibility and relevance of the sources. My comment about that is that having been involved with the Campus Writing Coordinator's summer assessment over the past several years, where we have read papers from 39C, the Freshman Integrated Program, Hum Core, and Upper Division, this category having to do with using credible and relevant sources is always the category where students score lowest. So the conclusion we can make from that is that this is a very difficult skill. It's not something that students learn in one course. It's something that they need to be taught over several courses, and they probably need to have more instruction in this. And so this is one area where I would like us as a staff to brainstorm on ways that we can incorporate more effective instruction in how to use sources in their writing. The other area that was low that I'm a little puzzled over, but it's consistent across all the sections, is in paragraph structure and coherence. So I think this is another area where, as a faculty, we need to think about how we're teaching paragraph quality and how we can improve that. Now I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk to you about the difference between the sections that did use Connect and that did not. The sections that did not use Connect are in red, and the sections that did use Connect are in yellow. So you'll see that, and again, we're looking just at gains here, and instead of just going up to 1.0, we're going up to 1.2, because the students that were using Connect had some gains that were higher than the average. You'll notice that in every category here, in almost every category here, the yellow bar is higher than the red. The 2 categories where the students without Connect scored as well or even better than the students with Connect have to do with sources, credibility and relevance, and source integration. And these are frankly 2 areas in which Connect was not involved. We did not have students read anything or do any work within the Connect text on source credibility and integration. So we can just discount those 2, and looking at this chart then, that using Connect has a definite positive effect on the gains that students are able to make within the course. A few more notes on the sections that were using Connect and those that weren't. The standard deviation between the scores and the gains was lower in the sections that used Connect than in the ones that did not. So in other words, there was an equalizing impact of using Connect on the students in a class. Their overall scores and their gains were more parallel in the classes where Connect was used. In the classes where Connect was not used, some students had huge gains, none, some had very little, but they were all over the board. So there is an equalizing impact of using Connect in the classes, and this is a good thing because we can say to the rest of our colleagues at the university that all the sections of 39B students are getting a similar experience and are using similar tools. Another positive outcome of this study is that we are able to verify that instructor grading is accurate. The instructor scored the 2 essays using the tool in Connect, and what we found is that the instructor scores were consistently higher than the outside reader scores. But the outside reader scores and the instructor scores were parallel, which verified the accuracy of both scores. It's not surprising that the instructor scores were higher. That is often the case even when I bring my own students' essays into a norming session within one of our staff meetings. The consensus score that is given by the staff is usually lower than the score I gave. And that's understandable because as instructors, we know our students much better than an outside reader. We know what kind of progress they've made, and our scores in part are a reflection of everything the student is doing in the class and not just the essay in front of us. But the fact that the instructor scores and the outside readers were directly parallel means that they are reading the essays in the same way and giving the same scores. Last, I've heard anecdotally from many of you that the students that Connect helps the most are the students who have the most to learn, or in other words, second language learners, Gen 1.5 students, students that are coming into our classes with lower scores. So I did a little case study of the growth of the lowest scoring students. So I went back in and pulled all the student data for students who scored a 1 or a 2 in all the rubric categories. And then I compared the gains that these lowest scoring students were able to make, both in the classes that were using Connect and the ones that were not using Connect, and found that the lowest scoring students that used Connect were able to increase by an average of 1.8, whereas the lowest scoring students who were not using Connect only increased by 0.87. 0.87 is still a great average increase, but you can notice that with Connect, it's 1 entire point higher. This confirms the suspicions that many of us have that Connect is the most helpful tool with helping students who need the most help, and probably is also another one of the reasons why Connect ended up being an equalizing agent among students within the classes where it was used. So the next steps are that I would like to get together in weeks 9 and 10 of our staff meetings this quarter and discuss these results further, brainstorm about some things we can do to improve our curriculum even further, and then see if any of you would like to volunteer to do some more assessment testing come spring. That's it for now. Thanks very much.